Welcome back to episode 2 of Authors at the Airport. And this one was a surprise. All right, guys, I just finished last night and the second book in my series, Authors at the Airport. And this one was David Baldacci's The Whole Truth. So this book was 530 pages and I finished it like in 4 days. Ridiculous for me. That's not very normally what I do. However, I'm going to put a little caveat because I read over 100 pages just last night. And part of that is because I noticed something about these kind of books. Just like the James Patterson one that I read, the chapters are incredibly short because they change, you usually change venue, you change kind of scene, so to speak, maybe even perspective. And it's something that I noticed with Dan Brown's books that I read years and years ago. I actually really liked them because they really keep you moving through a book because every chapter changes. And either you go to the baddie's point of view or you're just in a whole different country or whatever. So The Whole Truth was surprisingly, for me, a really great, fun, quick read. And I totally get why somebody would get hooked into him. So as far as the story itself, The Whole Truth, it is a little bit too realistic or possible. And I think it's one of those things that always gets me, whether it's with the Clancy books or any of those, where there's kind of spy and espionage, which this one has, but we're talking, it ends up being more kind of corporate induced spy espionage, but then you have countries involved. And it's basically the idea that a arms dealer, and he's a arms contractor. Sorry, arms dealer makes him sound like he's this illegitimate guy out in the boonies selling tanks from his backyard, and I don't know. But we say arms contractor, and you get the bigger idea. Now, this particular gentleman has decided that we need to go back to the Cold War, and through the use of mass media, not even mass media, the internet, through social media, they create this illusion that there is a reason for Russia and China to go after one another. Now, the whole thing, we have our two, heroes. And what's nice is one is a woman and one is a man. And though they don't have any type of relationship, they just react to one another, which is great. It could have switched it if you wanted to. But the spy is named Shaw, and he is trying to get out of the spy racket. He was kind of coerced into it. And then the heroine is a journalist, and her name's Katie. And they meet up because Katie's little spider sense starts tingling. So her journalistic, and she's a flawed character. She's an alcoholic. She's gotten 2 Pulitzer Prizes so far, but now we're on the backside of her career. At least it looks like it's going to be that way, and that's because of her alcoholism. And when we meet her, she's actually in Edinburgh, just doing covering a story on a very famous Scottish man who just died. So obituaries for the New York Times, basically. There's a lot that goes on in this book, but I really enjoyed overall. It was fast-paced. It kept moving. You were wondering how they were going to meet up. How are they going to catch this guy? We know, and through the whole book, you feel that the baddie is one step ahead. Now, meanwhile, he doesn't feel like he's a baddie. He thinks he's actually saving the world and putting it back in proper order. Woo! But the part that got me with this book is it is incredibly believable how this all gets started. And it is through the use of social media. It's through what we perceive to be true. And if enough people believe it, then it must be true, right? And we're being incredibly manipulated. So from that standpoint, this book was written back, I think, in 2004. Let me see. 2009. And for this still to be a plausible storyline a story that I kind of hold my breath about because I could see it actually still happening. I think it's one thing that's fascinating with these kind of writers, and again, I mentioned Clancy and some of the other ones, they're coming up with these far-fetched ideas for their novels, and then I'm like, dude, stop it. You're writing a handbook for these guys to do some really bad stuff, because this is believable. So stop it. But then don't, because I really enjoyed it. So their relationship is completely just working together, sometimes because they want to, sometimes because they don't. She has a soft spot for him, but not in a romantic way. She kind of sees his hurting and everything else because he is a ginormous guy. He's supposed to be huge and massive and, probably looks pretty scary and everything else. I mean, he's got scars all over him and he's a pretty roughy tufty, but yet he just is getting on with his job, so to speak. And you go through a bit of tragedy with him, which I kind of enjoyed, and I think that puts him off kilter and makes it more understandable why Katie would be as involved or wanting to be, connected to him or working with him on certain things. Okay, I can't really tell you anything about the story because you'll read through it. It's absolutely, and I do think it's really good. However, until those last ending bits, there were a couple times in this story where, because she's a journalist and a hard-hitting journalist at that, she often kind of figures out what happens because she did a piece on it previously. Well, I almost wrote an article about that, or I know about this and this. And there were some jumps that she made of realizing what this guy was really doing. It wasn't necessarily evidence that they found. And it's a weak part for me because you're just relying on the knowledge of the character. I don't know how else you could have done it because you would have slowed the pace down. And I think for these kind of books, pacing is everything. They want you to be turning these pages. And luckily for you, my husband was like, oh my God, you read 100 pages in, like an hour and a half, 2 hours. I don't normally read that fast. But I'll tell you, they're very small pages. There's not tons always written on them. So, hey. The chapter numbers take up a huge part. Those are easy to read. So, but I think overall, I would probably pick up another David Baldacci. I definitely have already told my husband he needs to read it, just so we can talk about it, because of the scenario that you see in this, taking care of the world type of thing, and going back to almost Cold War type. It is scary when you start seeing the numbers they talk about, like how much is spent on, and again, 2009, spent on military and all of that, and you go, wow. There is some moments of that, and I'm sure those are all based in truth. I can't imagine that you just arbitrarily put down these ridiculous numbers because they're numbers you can't even fathom. But I think overall the story is fast-paced, does really well. If you want something to pick up and just kind of breeze through and be kind of like, wow, I was more interested in what the guy was going to do next to manipulate this storyline as much as he was, and how he was going to do it, than anything else. When he finally gets caught, sorry, that's not a spoiler. We know the good guys always win in these. But the last probably 4 or 5 chapters and the kind of closing up was, I'm not even going to say rushed, because you've got that adrenaline. You're just going with the story. So I won't say rushed, but I do think that there's a couple moments where, the light bulb just comes on. I think it got a little dire to some degree, but at the same time, it would make a wonderful ending to an action movie. So if you like action movies, which I do sometimes, and there's what I love about this is there is no relationships between the two main characters. There's no illusion of that. You could have switched what gender identification you wanted with those characters, and it wouldn't have made that big of a deal. I think it makes Shaw seem more approachable, and you quickly, your heart goes for him quicker, because we imagine this big burly guy with this impossible job that he's been doing for years, and you learn a little bit about his background, so you do But I think that if you had switched that around, it again did not rely on it being a man and a woman. It's just nice. They kind of had even, footing in this whole thing. She kept up with him in a lot of places. And one of the things she kept saying is that she has had experiences in really tough situations because she was a war correspondent. So, she wasn't just a journalist writing behind a desk. She was out in the field. And I think that really helped too. So for my second author in Authors We See at the Airport, or Authors at the Airport, I'm going to actually say that David Baldacci is one that I would like to give another chance to, especially when I need something just kind of fast-paced, palate cleansing kind of feel. Definitely would be fantastic on a plane, because I probably on a really long flight would have almost read this entire book. So it is encouraging from that. I am recommending it to my husband. If you like these action thrillers, I think this is a pretty good one. It's very, very fast paced and keeps going, and the characters I actually enjoyed being with for the majority of the time. So not bad. So I understand, and I totally get if he writes in these type and people are expecting these kind of books, they know what they're going to get with him. Fabulous. So now I'm on to month number 3, and that means author number 3 that I believe is going to be Nora Roberts. Now I based this this ranking, there we go, on back in like December or January, so they might have changed a little bit. But for me, number 3 is Nora Roberts. Now I have a friend who does read a lot of Nora Roberts, and I'm going to take her recommendation as to which one she suggests, and we might even read it as our buddy read for March. So quite a change, I'm assuming, from running around the world saving the world one explosion at a time to what I think Nora Roberts probably does romance-based books. Now, the interesting thing with Nora Roberts is she is listed twice on this list, and it makes me wonder because she's also J.D. Robb. So if you put her numbers as Nora Roberts and J.D. Robb together, does she actually jump over James Patterson and David Baldacci? I don't know. But I'm looking forward to reading that because I've never read a Nora Roberts, and we'll have to see what I think. So come back in March. If you have any other suggestions for David Baldacci, I didn't get any in the comments, but please feel free to let me know. I have a feeling that a lot of my readers don't read him, but maybe if this shows up in somebody's feed and you do read David, let me know what your suggestion of a David Baldacci book I should read, because I'd like to read another one and just see, even if it's along these veins, because I do like these kind of books. They're fun to read. I don't read them very often, and so I was a big fan of Dan Brown. Yes, I admit it. I'm a big fan of Dan Brown. But anyway, go out there, find something fun to read. Let me know what you're reading down below, and I will be talking with you soon. So remember, keep turning those pages. Bye for now. Thanks for watching. Keep turning those pages.